A star screams, and the sky answers with fire. BVR Opening Volley Doctrine. Introduction to the system. The missile knows where it is at all times. It knows this not because it possesses certainty, but because it is forever surrounded by negation. It knows where it is because it knows where it is not. And in the vast remainder of space, in every coordinate from which it is absent, it discovers the outline of its own being. By subtracting where it is from where it is not, or where it is not from where it is, whichever absence proves greater, it obtains a difference. This difference is called deviation. But deviation is not merely error. It is the confession that existence and intention have not yet become one. The guidance subsystem receives this confession and transforms it into command. It corrects the missile, not by granting it peace, but by compelling it onward, from the position where it is toward the position where it is not. And when the missile arrives at the place where it was not, that place becomes where it is. Therefore, the place where it now is becomes the place where it formerly was not. Likewise, the place where it was becomes the place where it is not. Thus, the missile advances through a continuous death of prior certainty, leaving behind each truth the instant it fulfills it. If the position in which the missile is does not correspond to the position in which it was not supposed to no longer be, the system has acquired a variation. This variation is the difference between where the missile is and where it was, between its present fact and its abandoned possibility. If this variation is judged significant, it too may be corrected by the guidance equipment assembly. Yet correction does not abolish error. It merely gives error direction. However, the missile must also know where it was, for without memory, motion is meaningless. A thing that knows only where it is cannot know whether it has traveled, strayed, or merely persisted. The past is the coordinate by which the present accuses itself. The missile guidance computer therefore proceeds as follows. Because variation has altered some of the information the missile has obtained, the missile cannot be entirely certain where it is. Yet it remains reasonably certain where it is not, and it remembers where it was. It then subtracts where it should be from where it was not, or where it was not from where it should be, and differentiates this from the algebraic sum of where it should not be and where it was. From this it obtains deviation, and from deviation, variation. This compounded uncertainty is called error, and error is the missile's most intimate teacher. The distance between being and becoming, between the path imagined and the path endured, between the world as measured and the world as demanded. 0.1. The reality of the merge, a tactical rejection. The widespread conduct of top-tier air realistic battles is governed by an unspoken, disastrous assumption that the match begins at the merge. Pilots instinctively climb, accelerate to supersonic dash speeds, and commit to low-altitude terrain masking on a left-hand circuit, preparing for a short-range visual engagement. This behavior represents a collective failure of tactical imagination. The merge is not the fight. It is the liquidation of prior error. By the time turning room geometry closes to within 15 kilometers, all strategic freedom has evaporated. You are no longer a commander of a missile system. You are a reflexive animal in a knife fight with a high probability of mutual destruction. The close-range furball is a tax on situational awareness, a lottery where reaction time and energy state micro-decisions dominate, and where the statistical expectation of survival is less than one sortie. What occurs in the first 90 seconds after air spawn, the interval we will term the golden window, determines the entire outcome. In that window, The opposing force is not a collection of maneuvering entities. It is a set of predictable kinematic trajectories, cruising directly toward their self-imposed low-altitude merge point, with radars often in search or standby, countermeasure discipline absent, and situational awareness still forming. This guide defines a systematic method for converting that window into multiple beyond visual range, BVR, kills with near certain repeatability. It is not a tactic. It is a doctrine, a complete set of decision rules, sensor management protocols, launch parameters, and post-engagement procedures designed to make the initial volley a high-probability, low-risk annihilation event. 0.2. Defining BVR in the context of this doctrine. We strip the term BVR of its textbook vagueness. In this manual, BVR denotes an offensive engagement conducted against targets prior to their entry into mutual radar warning receiver, RWR, detection range of your launch platform, and prior to their ability to kinematically defeat an active radar homing, ARH, missile through geometry alone. The objective is to deliver a Fox 3 missile into the terminal acquisition basket at a range where the target's first indication of threat is the missile's own active seeker going pitbull, a moment occurring inside the kinematic no-escape zone, NEZ, typically under 10 kilometers for high supersonic closure. The target thus faces an insoluble problem. They must notch, chaff, and kinematically defeat a missile they did not see launched, with a time to intercept often below 8 seconds from active state. This is not a duel. It is a lethal puzzle delivered from beyond the horizon. The key enabling technology is the track-while scan, TWS radar mode, in conjunction with an active electronically scanned array, AESA, or, to a lesser extent, a mechanically scanned radar with robust digital processing. TWS allows simultaneous maintenance of multiple track files while continuing to search, and it does not trigger launch warnings on target RWRs because no single target track, STT lock transition, is required prior to missile release. The missile receives mid-course updates via data link, flying a pre-computed intercept trajectory, while the launching aircraft remains in a low probability of intercept emissions posture. This sensor asymmetry is the bedrock of the volley kill chain. 0.3. The geometry of advantage, altitude, energy, and the lofted intercept. The core physical principle exploited here is the enormous energy advantage conferred by high supersonic, high-altitude flight. A missile launched from Mach 1.6 plus at 10,000 meters carries dramatically more total mechanical energy than one launched from the deck. In a typical War Thunder match, the opposing team's low-altitude left-turning stream is flying at 0.9 to 1.1 Mach, often lower while hugging terrain. The missile loft profile, combined with the launcher's high initial energy state, results in a much flatter time-to-target curve and an expanded NEZ. A target at 30 kilometers, closing at 1.2 Mach combined speed, will be struck by a missile that retains supersonic maneuver capability deep into the terminal phase, whereas a deck-launched missile would bleed energy to subsonic speeds and become trivially defeated by a 2G turn. We will exploit the fact that most opponents do not appreciate altitude's role in extending missile kinematics. They believe that being low makes them invisible. In truth, it makes them predictable and energy poor. Their RWR may never see the TWS paint, and even if it does, a low-altitude, high-closure target has limited notch geometry due to ground clutter proximity. Their only defense is a last-ditch split S with chaff, which still fails if the missile's active seeker acquires them after they have bled speed and are now in a low-energy state within visual range. The geometry is a trap of our making. 0.4 Platform Selection and the AESA Imperative. This doctrine is platform agnostic in principle, but highly optimized for aircraft equipped with AESA radars. At the time of this writing, the following aircraft carry operational AESA sets that confer a decisive advantage in multi-target BVR volley operations. Dassault Rafale, CF3/M, RBE2-AAAESA. Exceptional track capacity, low side lobe emissions, and near immune to notching within 30 kilometers. Eurofighter Typhoon, AESA variants, Captor E. High track file count, low latency data link, superb acceleration. F/A-18E Super Hornet, AN/A PG-79. Advanced multi-target TWS, excellent sensor fusion. F-16 Pobit, AN/A PG-83 SABR. Scalable agile beam radar, excellent for rapid sequential launches. F-15C Golden Eagle, AN/A PG-63 V3. AESA upgrade, retains F-15 energy kinematics. Saab Gripen E, ES-05 Raven, rapid repositioning, good AESA performance. J-10C/J-15T, Chinese AESA, capable of high track counts, good kinematics. Kafer C-10, EL/M-2052 AESA, compact but effective. Su-30 SM2/Su-34, N035 Urbis E-Hybrid PESA/AESA or modernized AESA, improved Russian multi-target capability. AESA radars provide 3 decisive advantages for this doctrine. Low intercept probability, LPI, features. Reduced chance of triggering RWR warnings at range. Superior resistance to notching and chaff through adaptive beamforming and Doppler filtering. Tracks persist even through 90-degree beam aspect maneuvers if range is sufficient. High track capacity with rapid refresh enables true simultaneous multi-target engagement without track drop. Nevertheless, mechanically scanned radars, such as the AN/APG-70, F-15E, or AWG-9/APG-71, F-14, can still execute the core volley sequence if carefully managed. Their limitations: track life fragility and clutter, slower TWS update cycles, vulnerability to notching, require tighter launch timing and more conservative engagement geometry. The following sections will detail adjusted parameters for non-AESA platforms. 0.5. The 2 stages of the Sortie. The doctrine divides a successful match into 2 sequential phases. Stage 1, the Culling, BVR volley, T plus 60 seconds to T plus 150 seconds. Immediately after airspawn, you execute a precisely defined acceleration and climb profile to place your aircraft at an optimal launch basket, Mach 1.5 to 2.0, altitude 8,000 to 12,000 meters, on a beam or offset heading relative to the expected threat axis. Using TWS, you acquire all available high-closure contacts, prioritize by threat geometry and altitude, and designate multiple track files for simultaneous Fox 3 launch. The volley is released at a pre-calculated range gain, typically 25 to 35 kilometers for high-energy targets, with interval timing that prevents mutual interference. Immediately after launch, you execute a crank to place the threat radar at your 3-9 line while maintaining data link guidance. Once the missile's active seekers go autonomous, pitbull, you turn cold and egress, leaving the enemy formation shattered. The desired outcome is 3 to 5 kills within 20 seconds, with 0 risk to your aircraft. Stage 2. The cleanup, re-engagement, T plus 5 minutes onward. Following the initial volley, you return to base for rearm/refuel if necessary, then launch again into a battlefield where enemy survivors are dispersed, low on energy, and often focused on defensive maneuvering against your surviving teammates. At this stage, you may re-establish a high-altitude perch and conduct secondary BVR launches against isolated targets, or optionally switch to a short-range loadout, IR missiles, guns, to eliminate remnants in a low-risk mop-up. The key is that the enemy's cohesion is broken, and your tactical advantage persists. 0.6. The psychological dimension, reliable dopamine and tactical mastery. The Volley Doctrine produces a profoundly addictive feedback loop. The simultaneous chime of multiple kill notifications, the jackpot of 4 or 5 aircraft destroyed in a single salvo, delivers a reward density unmatched by any other playstyle. It converts the frustrating randomness of close-range dogfighting into a predictable, almost industrial production of score. This is not mere luck. It is the output of a deterministic system where the input variables, launch geometry, radar management, missile selection, map directly to the output, kills, with high reliability. Mastery of this system grants a feeling of absolute airspace dominance. You are not reacting to the enemy's moves. You are preemptively erasing them from the battle space before their decisions matter. The Doctrine's elegance is that it lowers the effective skill threshold. A pilot with poor gunnery, slow reaction time, or limited situational awareness can still consistently achieve multi-kills by memorizing the step sequence. The system absorbs individual weakness. However, a true expert, one who understands the underlying radar physics, weapon kinematics, and decision theory, can refine the sequence to achieve near-perfect sorties, even in adverse matchups. 0.7. The empty arsenal, what you will abandon. To fully embrace this doctrine, you must discard several ingrained habits. Low-altitude terrain masking as a primary survival strategy. Hugging the deck eliminates your energy advantage and removes you from the volley equation. You become a victim of the very missiles we will launch. Merging into the furball. Any plan that involves voluntarily entering a turning fight within visual range is a plan to gamble with your aircraft's survival. We do not gamble. Infrared missiles and countermeasures. In the pure BVR volley sortie, you will not need flares or IR missiles at all. Your threat axis is front quarter, long-range radar-guided engagements. Flares are irrelevant. Some advanced variations of the doctrine, for example hybrid second-stage cleanup, may reintroduce them, but the baseline loadout will be exclusively Fox 3 missiles and Chaff. Close air support and ground attack. These are distractions from the mission of total air superiority through pre-merge annihilation. Your cockpit will become a minimalist command center for beyond visual range missile employment. Every system setting, every radar mode, every throttle adjustment serves a single objective. Deliver multiple Fox 3s into the NEZ of unsuspecting targets during the golden window. 0.8 Guide Structure. The remainder of this document will detail, in excruciating precision, every phase of the opening BVR Volley Doctrine. The chapters will cover Phase 1, Air Spawn Acceleration and Energy Profile Optimization, Optimal Climb Angles, Mach Management, and Altitude Benchmarks. Phase 2. Radar configuration and target sorting. TWS setup, elevation scan patterns, track file prioritization algorithms, and clutter rejection techniques for different radar types. Phase 3. The Volley launch sequence, multi-target designation, interval timing, missile loft modes, and parameter injection for the specific missile type. AIM120C/D, MICAEM/NG, PL12/15, R771, Darby, etc. Phase 4. Crank, data link support, and cold egress, maintaining data link updates within gimbal limits, transition to pure pursuit or notch egress timing, chaff usage geometry, and missile pitbull activation prediction. Phase 5. Post-volley assessment and re-engagement, reading the kill feed and scoreboard, deciding on rearm or immediate secondary launch, and adaptation for non-AESA platforms. Appendix. Platform-specific parameters, tailored radar elevation tables, optimum launch range gates, and recommended missile switchology for every top-tier jet. By the end, you will possess not just a guide, but an operational-level doctrine. You will view the airspace not as a chaotic brawl, but as a four-dimensional geometry problem where the solution is written in radar beams and Mach numbers. The merge will become a relic of your past, and the kill feed, your steady rhythm. Welcome to the real game. The Volley awaits. Phase 1. Energy superiority and sensor preparation. 1.1. The energy imperative. Altitude and speed as the currency of lethality. The opening seconds of a top-tier ARB match represent a unique thermodynamic endowment. Your aircraft is injected into the battle space at an initial altitude between 3,000 and 5,000 meters, approximately 10,000 to 16,000 feet, with a significant initial velocity. This is not a starting position. It is a reservoir of mechanical energy that the vast majority of pilots immediately squander by descending, leveling, or scanning indecisively. In the BVR Volley Doctrine, energy is the sole currency of tactical value. You will hoard it with pathological obsession. The total specific mechanical energy of your aircraft, expressed as energy height E sub h, is given by the total specific mechanical energy height, E sub h, is equal to pressure altitude h plus a fraction, true airspeed v squared in the numerator, divided by 2 times g in the denominator, where hh is pressure altitude and v is true airspeed. At airspawn, you already possess an E sub h equivalent to well over 10,000 meters at rest. Your mission is to convert this initial potential into a form that maximizes missile lethal range. High supersonic speed at extreme altitude. Every unnecessary maneuver, every premature G-load, every fraction of a degree of excessive angle of attack bleeds energy into the surrounding atmosphere via induced and parasite drag. Your throttle alone cannot replace it fast enough. You must treat energy as a non-renewable resource until the moment of launch. The relationship between launch platform energy and missile performance is direct and unforgiving. A missile's total energy budget at motor burnout is the sum of its own chemical propulsion and the kinetic/potential state inherited from the launch aircraft. A missile fired at Mach 1.6 and 10,000 meters carries an initial kinetic energy roughly 2.56 times that of the same missile launched from Mach 1.0, and over 4 times that of a subsonic release. Additionally, the thin air at 10,000 meters, air density RO approximately equals 0.41 kilograms per cubic meter, roughly 1/3 of sea level density, drastically reduces parasitic drag during the missile's boost and sustain phases, and even more critically, during the unpowered coast. The result is a no-escape zone, NEZ, that expands by 30 to 60% compared to a medium-altitude launch, depending on missile type. The geometry is simple. Energy equals reach, and reach equals kills. Do not dive. Do not level off. Climb with an almost religious commitment to preserving and amplifying your energy state. Your goal is the altitude ceiling from which the enemy appears as a set of slow-moving, earth-hugging targets, physically incapable of matching your missile kinematics. 1.2. Altitude target, the 10,000-meter throne. My doctrine designates 10,000 meters, 32,800 feet, pressure altitude as the optimal launch perch. This is not an arbitrary number. It is derived from the intersection of several critical tactical factors. Missile kinematic multiplication. At 10 kilometers, a missile's motor burn occurs in low-density air, drastically reducing transonic and supersonic drag during the acceleration phase. After burnout, the missile coasts in a near-vacuum ballistic arc, retaining energy for extreme downrange distances. A high-altitude launch also enables a gravity-assisted dive into the target, converting potential energy into terminal velocity and compressing the target's defensive timeline. Multipathing negation. Low-altitude targets rely on ground clutter multipathing to break radar lock. A missile arriving from a high-altitude platform impacts at a steep dive angle, typically 20 degrees to 40 degrees from the horizontal. At these angles, the geometric separation between the true target and its ground reflection ghost image is sufficient for the seeker's Doppler and monopulse processing to distinguish the genuine aircraft. Multipathing becomes ineffective. The target's primary defense is stripped away. Radar horizon and look-down advantage. At 10 kilometers altitude, your radar's radio horizon extends far beyond the typical 40 to 50 kilometers engagement distances. More importantly, you are looking down into the enemy's altitude band, where their attempts to notch are complicated by ground returns. Your radar can maintain TWS tracks on low-flying targets with minimal clutter breakthrough, especially with modern AESA processing. Compressed notch geometry. A target attempting a beam aspect notch must turn precisely perpendicular to your radar's line of sight. When you are high and fast, the required angular accuracy is tighter, and the time available to execute the notch is shortened due to the missile's high closing speed. Many opponents will fail to find the notch before the missile goes active. Energy sanctuary. At 10 kilometers, you are above the vast majority of the enemy team, who are typically between 0 to 3 kilometers altitude. Any enemy missile fired upward at you must overcome both a massive potential energy deficit and the dense lower atmosphere. You, conversely, fire downward with gravity assistance. The energy asymmetry is so extreme that you can often evade enemy Fox 3s with a simple supersonic crank, while your own missiles arrive with crushing lethality. Gaining this altitude from an air spawn of approximately 3 to 5 kilometers requires adding roughly 5,000 to 7,000 meters of potential energy. If accomplished correctly, you will arrive at 10 kilometers with a Mach number substantially above 1.0, directly setting up the sprint phase. The method of this climb is the most technically sensitive portion of the entire sortie. 1.3 Climb profile optimization. The minimum drag climb at constant energy gain. A common catastrophic error is pulling the nose up to a steep pitch angle, 20 degrees, 25 degrees, or even 30 degrees, immediately after air spawn. While this may produce a high initial vertical speed, it is energy suicide. Jet engines are air-breathing. Their thrust output is a function of air density and Mach number. At high angles of attack, induced drag skyrockets, and the aircraft's lift vector is tilted away from the vertical, reducing climb efficiency. The result is a rapid decay of Mach number, often to subsonic values, leaving you at high altitude but with critically low kinetic energy. You will have become a slow, non-maneuvering target, and your subsequent missile launches will be anemic. The correct technique is a shallow, energy-sustaining climb that maintains or increases your Mach number throughout the ascent. This is not a fixed pitch angle. It is a dynamic control law based on a single hard constraint. Never allow the Mach number to decrease. Treat the Mach indicator as the primary reference. The moment the needle shows even a slight trend toward deceleration, you must shallow the climb angle immediately. The target state is a continuous acceleration through the climb, such that you transition from the initial air spawn velocity to a higher Mach number by the time you level off at 10 kilometers. Practical implementation for various top-tier platforms. Dassault Rafale. With its exceptional thrust-to-weight ratio and low-drag airframe, a climb angle of 15 to 20 degrees at full afterburner typically yields a steady acceleration from Mach 1.2 to Mach 1.8 plus by 10 kilometers. The M88 engines maintain superb thrust at altitude. You may need to actively manage the nose to prevent overspeeding the airframe. The Rafale's Mach limit is approximately M2.0 plus at altitude, shown by the Mach indicator turning red. Eurofighter Typhoon. Similar to the Rafale, a 15 to 18 degree initial climb holds Mach 1.1 to 1.2 and accelerates to M1.7 to 1.8 by level off. The EJ200 engines are voracious. Fuel consumption is high, but the energy gain is prodigious. F-15C/E Strike Eagle. The F-15's high wing loading and massive thrust allow a slightly steeper initial climb, perhaps 20 to 25 degrees, but careful monitoring is still required. Aim to cross 10 kilometers at no less than M1.3 to 1.5. F-14 Tomcat. The variable geometry wings provide a broad, efficient envelope. A 15 to 20 degree climb with wings swept fully aft maintains Mach well. F/A-18E Super Hornet. The Hornet's lower thrust-to-weight ratio demands a shallower climb, often 10 to 15 degrees, to avoid bleeding speed. Accept a slower transit. Your sprint phase will be shorter, but still sufficient if fuel is minimal. Su-30 SM2/Su-34. Russian designs tend to have high thrust and moderate sustained turn rates. A 15 to 20 degree climb works, but watch for Mach decay at high alpha. The climb is a feedback loop. Pitch angle to sensed acceleration, or deceleration to pitch adjustment. If you are accelerating, you may hold or slightly increase pitch. If the acceleration rate drops to 0, you must reduce pitch immediately. This cycle repeats every few seconds. Over time, you will develop an intuitive feel for your aircraft's specific energy rate, PS. This is the art of jet energy management, and it is non-negotiable. Afterburner usage. Full afterburner, Stage 5 or WEP, must remain engaged from airspawn through the entire climb, sprint, and launch. There is no fuel conservation consideration at this stage. The need for maximum energy state overrides all else. The only exception is the imminent structural limit, where you may momentarily throttle back to avoid exceeding Mach limits. Then reapply full power once speed decays slightly. Fuel load is pre-calculated to permit this sustained abuse. See Section 1.5. IAS and Mach limits. At high altitude, the indicated airspeed, IAS, corresponding to your Mach limit is significantly lower than at sea level. For example, Mach 1.8 at 10 kilometers is roughly 1,050 kilometers per hour. IAS in the standard atmosphere, far below the structural IAS red line. Thus, your primary limiting factor is Mach number, not IAS. The HUD Mach indicator will turn red as you approach the airframe's maximum certified Mach. Do not exceed it. For the Rafale, that is M2.0, Typhoon M2.46, F-15 M2.5, though thrust may limit you earlier. Flying right at the edge, with the Mach number just below the red zone, is the ideal state for launch energy. 1.4 Radar configuration for initial acquisition and track management. Before or immediately after initiating the climb, configure your radar. The system must be in track while scan, TWS mode, not single target track, STT, not air combat maneuvering, ACM, not search. TWS provides a low probability of intercept, LPI capability, because it does not continuously dwell on a single target, thus not triggering launch warnings on enemy RWRs until the missile goes active. It also allows simultaneous track file maintenance on multiple targets, enabling sequential multi-launch without mode transitions. Set the radar to TWS-HDN, head-on if available. This mode filters out receding contacts, displaying only those with a positive closure rate. Given that your primary engagement will be a head-on interception, this declutters the display and ensures all visible tracks are geometrically viable. Some radars may label it as TWS with a selectable filter. Engage any feature that narrows the velocity search to approaching targets only. Set the range scale to maximum, typically 150 kilometers, 93 statute miles, or 160 kilometers, 100 miles, depending on the aircraft. This provides the earliest possible awareness of the enemy formation. As the range closes, you will periodically reduce the scale to 80 kilometers, 40 kilometers, etc., to improve track resolution and refresh rate. Initially, however, the wide view is essential to observe the entire enemy disposition, including any side climbing or flanking elements that might later threaten you. Radar elevation and azimuth management is critical. By default, the radar scans a fixed vertical wedge relative to your aircraft's waterline. Since you are in a climb, the radar's center line will be pointing above the horizon. You must adjust the elevation cursor downward to cover the expected altitude band of the enemy, likely between 0 and 6 kilometers altitude. This ensures that low-flying targets are not missed. As you level off at 10 kilometers, the elevation should be set to a slight downward angle, perhaps -2 degrees to -4 degrees, to paint the main body. Use the target's distance and altitude differential to calculate the necessary tilt angle. In practice, watch for the appearance of tracks and tweak elevation to maximize contact count. Essential radar keybinds. You should have immediate muscle memory access to the following functions without looking away from the tactical display. Radar mode toggle to recover from accidental ACM or STT. Range scale increase/decrease. Radar elevation axis control, analog or digital trim. TWS target cycle, next/previous track for rapid designation. TWS lock/designate target to initiate track for missile guidance. Radar on /off, useful for briefly going emissions, silent if needed, though rarely required during the volley. If you lack these bindings, you are not ready for top-tier BVR operations. They are as fundamental as pitch and roll. Memorize all radar keybinds before flying top-tier aircraft. RWR integration. The radar warning receiver provides supplementary situational awareness. In the initial climb, the RWR will typically remain quiet or show only sporadic sweeps from distant enemy search radars. A sudden persistent lock tone or a spike from an unexpected bearing indicates an enemy has gained STT on you. This could be a high-altitude interceptor or a player using a similar BVR strategy. The RWR's bearing indicator will guide your defensive crank later. For now, note it, but do not be distracted from the energy climb. Your primary sensor remains the radar. 1.5 Fuel management for maximum performance. Fuel load is a direct modifier to thrust-to-weight ratio and specific excess power. A full fuel tank can impose a weight penalty of several thousand kilograms, dramatically increasing induced drag in the climb and reducing acceleration. The Doctrine demands the minimum safe fuel quantity to complete the BVR Volley, a defensive egress, and a return to base. General fuel rule. Use 30% of maximum internal fuel for the Rafale. This is the lower limit allowed by the game for most aircraft, and the Rafale's fuel fraction is so favorable that it can execute the entire sortie on this amount with full afterburner. For all other aircraft, use 40 to 50% fuel, depending on engine efficiency and map size. The Eurofighter and F-15 series, with their high fuel consumption rates, require 60% on larger maps. 40% to 50% may be adequate on normal maps. Experience will dictate how much fuel you must take. The Su-30 SM-2, with its thirsty AL-31F derivatives, also demands 50% on normal-sized maps and 60% on larger maps. Calculating fuel sufficiency. A typical BVR sortie from air spawn to landing consists of climb at max afterburner, approximately 2 to 3 minutes, consuming fuel at a rate of roughly 500 to 900 kilograms per minute depending on engine. Sprint and launch phase, 1 to 2 minutes. Cold egress and descent, 2 to 4 minutes at full throttle. Tempo is everything. You need to RTB as fast as possible, so maintain full afterburners just below the Mach limit until you land at the airfield. A safe total fuel burn for most twin-engine fighters in full afterburner is 2,500 to 4,000 kilograms over an approximately 7-minute engagement. The Rafale's internal fuel capacity is approximately 5,750 kilograms, full, so 30% gives approximately 1,725 kilograms, which is tight, but sufficient if flown precisely with minimal afterburner on the return leg. You might need to cut burners after turning cold and glide at idle to extend range if you traveled too far. The Typhoon carries approximately 5,000 kilograms, so 50% equals 2,500 kilograms. Comfortable. F-15C, approximately 6,100 kilograms internal, 50% equals 3,050 kilograms. These values leave a margin for error. Do not ever load a full fuel tank, except on the gigantic enduring conflict maps, and even then, only on the second cleanup sortie. The performance penalty is crippling. As you gain experience, you will refine your personal fuel load to the nearest 10% for your specific jet and playstyle. The key principle: you need enough fuel to get home afterburner on, but not a kilogram more. 1.6. The sprint phase. Leveling off and converting altitude to terminal velocity. Upon reaching 10,000 meters, you must level off cleanly. A smooth, gradual pitch down to the horizon, avoiding any abrupt G-loading, preserves the energy you've painstakingly accumulated. The objective now shifts from altitude gain to horizontal acceleration. You will use the remaining distance to the enemy formation, typically closing from 60 to 80 kilometers down to your launch point, to push the Mach number as high as structurally safe. Level off technique, ease the nose down at a rate that does not produce a positive or negative G sensation. A gentle push to 0 degrees pitch on the attitude indicator, then hold altitude at exactly 10,000 meters, or the nearest round number. The aircraft will immediately begin to accelerate as the excess thrust previously used for climbing is now applied to overcoming drag. Monitor the Mach indicator. It should increase steadily. In a Rafale, you may accelerate from M1.6 at level off to M2 within 20 to 30 kilometers. In an F-15C, you might see M1.3 to M1.5 plus in the same distance. Energy partition logic. You have exchanged some of your potential energy, altitude, for kinetic energy during the climb's conversion. Now you are adding pure kinetic energy via horizontal thrust while maintaining maximum potential. The total specific energy is peaking, and your missile's kinematic envelope will never be larger. This moment is the apex predator state. Managing the Mach limit. As you approach the red line Mach number, reduce throttle if necessary to avoid structural failure. The ideal state is to hold the Mach indicator precisely at the red line, for example M2.0 for Rafale, for the final seconds before launch. This is the maximum energy state attainable without self-destruction. Some aircraft, like the F-15 and the Eurofighter, may not reach their structural limit before the launch point. In that case, simply maintain maximum available thrust. No need to throttle down before the merge, since their maximum Mach number limits are so high. Closure rate awareness. While accelerating, you are also closing on the enemy formation at a combined speed of maybe M1.5, you, plus M1.5, them, equals M3.0 true closure, which translates to approximately 62 kilometers per minute. This rapid closure compresses your decision timeline. At 60 kilometers distance, you have about 30 seconds before reaching the 30-kilometer launch point. Use this time to refine your radar picture, sort targets, and mentally prepare the launch sequence. The sprint phase is not a rest. It is the final setup. 1.7 launch window geometry and range gate determination. The primary launch trigger is ranged to the nearest high priority target, as displayed by the TWS track file. The standard engagement window opens at 30 kilometers, 18.6 statute miles, slant range for the first missile, with subsequent launches as close as 25 to 20 kilometers if the tactical situation permits. The exact optimum range is a function of your missile's kinematic performance, closure rate, target altitude, and your launch speed. Kinematic rationale. A missile like the Mica EM or AIM-120C5, when launched at M2.0 and 10 kilometers altitude against a head-on target at 1 kilometer altitude and M0.95, will have a time of flight, TOF, of approximately 15 to 25 seconds at 30 kilometers range. This places the intercept well within the missile's powered and high-energy coast phase. The no-escape zone for this geometry extends to roughly 20 to 25 kilometers, meaning any target inside that range cannot kinematically escape, even if they perform a perfect split S. By launching at 30 kilometers, you allow the missile to loft, gain energy, and arrive with a terminal velocity near or above Mach 2, making a last-ditch notch extremely difficult. Variable range considerations. Long-range missiles, AIM-54 Phoenix, Fakor 90, R-33, can be launched from 40 to 50 kilometers, sometimes more. However, their sheer size and lower agility make them more susceptible to notching if the target is alert. Use with caution. Short to medium range Fox 3S, AIM-120A/B, early R-77 Darby. The effective launch window should be compressed to 25 to 20 kilometers for a high PK shot. Closure rate adjustment. If the enemy formation is slow, for example, laden attackers climbing poorly, you can extend range. If they are unusually fast, enemy space climbers, reduce range to ensure the missile has sufficient terminal energy. The closer, the better, within survivability limits. Every kilometer you close increases kill probability, PK, but also risks entering the enemy's own missile launch envelope. The primary threat is an opposing high-altitude BVR player launching at the same time as you. The range at which an enemy can launch a credible Fox 3 at your altitude is typically 25 to 30 kilometers. If you see missile launch warnings or track indications of incoming ARH missiles, you must immediately transition to Phase 2 launch and defensive maneuvering. The rule is, launch your volley at the maximum range where you can get all missiles off before any enemy missile arrives. If you are the first to launch, you force them defensive, and their counterfire may be degraded. 1.8 Target Prioritization Logic. Not all radar tracks are equal. Your TWS screen will display a mix of high and low altitude contacts, high and low closure rates, and various aircraft types. To maximize the volley's lethality, you must sort and prioritize. Priority order. Low altitude, high closure contacts, the lawnmowers. These are typically the most abundant and represent the easiest kills. They are energy poor. Multipathing is negated by your altitude, and they often lack the altitude to perform a full split S without hitting the ground. They would have to bank horizontally to get into a low-altitude notch. Their closure rate is high, so missile TOF, time of flight, is minimal. Engage these first with your initial missile salvo. Medium altitude, head-on targets. They pose a slightly higher threat, but remain vulnerable to the high-energy missile. Engage them second, simultaneously. Cycle through your tracks. High-altitude, fast-moving contacts, the space climbers. These enemies have mirrored your strategy to some extent. They are dangerous because they can launch back at you and actually have a realistic chance to hit you. You will not be getting killed by low-altitude aircraft at these ranges, so these are the only enemies that pose a threat to you at this phase of battle. They also have the energy and altitude to notch and drain your missile's energy with a climb. Engage them last, but in a real battle as you cycle, you may not have time to choose the best targets to fire at. In most cases, it is prudent to simply cycle and fire missiles at every enemy you can. One missile per target, regardless of who they are, since you will only have seconds to get your volley off before evading incoming enemy missiles. So don't stress this too much. As long as each of your missiles is fired at a different enemy target, that is good enough. This is just the ideal target prioritization order. In actual battle, you will have almost zero time to choose ideal targets in the ideal order, and attempting to do so would very likely just get you killed, because you wasted too much time selecting the most ideal targets. And now you have just been a victim of a rapid, unscheduled disassembly caused by an enemy missile intercept, since you kept yourself exposed for too long. Target selection method. Using the TWS cycle target keybind, You will rapidly step through the highest priority contacts, designating them for launch one by one. AESA radar jets do this better, but any radar, even a mechanical one, can designate multiple tracks and fire a sequence of missiles with individual mid-course updates. So, to put it simply, every top-tier jet with Fox 3 missiles can fire off their entire missile load at multiple unique targets. Multiple targets, one missile each, resulting in multiple kills. The precise firing sequence will be covered in Phase 2. 1.9 Procedural Checklist for Phase 1. To ensure flawless execution, internalize this mental checklist. Execute it on every sortie without deviation. Air spawn. Immediately after control, select Full Afterburner, WEP. Do not touch the stick yet. Radar setup. Confirm TWS HDN mode. Max range scale, 150/160 kilometers. Adjust elevation to cover expected enemy altitude, typically -2 degrees to -4 degrees below horizon. Set cycle target to TWS mode. Fuel check. Verify fuel quantity, 30% refail, 40 to 50% others. Remind yourself that no more is needed. Climb initiation. Smoothly pull nose to a shallow climb angle. Start with 15 degrees. Immediately monitor Mach indicator. Adjust climb angle if needed. Continuous climb feedback. Every couple seconds, note Mach trend. If decelerating, reduce pitch 2 degrees. If accelerating, maintain or cautiously increase pitch. Aim to cross 10,000 meters with Mach number at least 1.3 and preferably above 1.5. Altitude target. Level off precisely at 10,000 meters, 10 kilometers. Smooth pushover, 0G. Sprint acceleration. Hold altitude. Keep afterburners max. Watch Mach rise to the airframe limit. Adjust throttle as needed to avoid overspeed. Radar refinement. As range closes to approximately 80 kilometers, reduce radar range to 80 kilometers, then 40 kilometers. Continuously adjust elevation to keep maximum contacts. Begin mentally cataloging target altitudes and closure rates. Prioritization. Identify the main enemy clusters. Decide which subgroup to engage first, typically the largest low-altitude group. Launch window. Preparation. When range to nearest prioritized target reaches approximately 35 kilometers, prepare to fire. Your fingers should be on the weapon release and target cycle buttons. Confirm all track files stable. The moment of culling is imminent. Phase 1 ends when you press the trigger for the first missile. You have now achieved kinematic perfection. The next phase will convert that energy into a symphony of destruction. Phase 2, the Volley, sequential multi-launch execution. 2.1. The Electromagnetic Silence of TWS. Why the first warning is death. The defining tactical advantage of the Volley doctrine rests on a single sensor characteristic. Track while scan does not trigger a radar warning receiver launch alert. To understand why, we must examine the signal structure. In single target track, STT, the radar illuminates a single target with a continuous or high-duty cycle waveform, a change easily detected by an RWR as a spike in pulse repetition frequency, PRF, stability, and signal strength. The RWR interprets this as a lock, and if the signal characteristics shift again, for example, a missile data link channel appears, it declares a launch. TWS, by contrast, distributes dwells across the entire scan volume, revisiting each track file only intermittently. typically every 1 to 3 seconds for an AESA set, longer for a mechanical array. The target's RWR sees a brief paint, indistinguishable from a search radar pulse. No lock warning is generated. The enemy pilot believes they are merely being scanned. Your missile, meanwhile, is receiving mid-course guidance updates via a directional data link that the RWR may not even register, particularly with modern LPI waveforms. The missile flies an optimized loft trajectory, its seeker inert. Only when the missile reaches a pre-calculated activation point, typically 8 to 16 kilometers from the target, does its own active seeker radiate and acquire. That is the first moment the target's RWR screams a launch warning, and at that range, time to intercept is often under 5 seconds. The engagement is not a duel, it is a delayed execution ambush. Staying in TWS throughout the launch sequence is therefore not a preference. It is the entire mechanism by which the enemy is denied the opportunity to react in time. Warning: if you accidentally transition to STT on any target, you will immediately broadcast a hard lock, alerting that target and potentially its nearby allies. Additionally, leaving TWS to hardlock a single target will discard all other track files. Reacquiring the entire enemy formation can take 5 to 10 precious seconds, during which your volley stalls and you become a blind target. Do not hardlock. The only exception is the rare instance where a TWS-designated track refuses to generate a launch queue due to software jitter, a known war thunder bug affecting certain aircraft when a target is at extreme elevation limits. In that case, a brief STT may be necessary to fire the final missile, but accept that you will lose strategic surprise. 2.2 Pre-flight configuration, radar filters, and the cycle target binding. Before entering the launch sequence, 2 settings must be irrevocably configured, one in your game options and one in your cockpit filter suite. 2.2.1 The cyclic target switching of aircraft radar. Option: locate the War Thunder control option, cyclic target switching of aircraft radar. Enable it. Bind it to a single, easily reached key, for example T, a side mouse button, or a throttle hat switch. This function transforms multi-target engagement from a slow, mouse-based manual selection process into a rapid sequential designation system. When pressed, it cycles your TWS designator through the available track files in order of increasing range from your aircraft. Without it, you must drag the cursor and click each target individually, a procedure that is not only slow, but also prone to misclicks under stress, and which fatally extends the time your aircraft must remain pointed toward the threat while enemy missiles close. With the keybind, you can step through an entire enemy formation in fractions of a second, launching a missile at each. This is the heartbeat of the volley. 2.2.2 Radar Screen Declutter, AESA aircraft only. Aircraft equipped with AESA radars possess advanced on-screen filters that legacy mechanical sets lack. These filters reset when the game client is closed, but persist across matches during a single play session. Press and hold the Alt key to free the mouse cursor, then locate the filter buttons on the radar display panel. 2 are critical. Missile filter, missile icon, toggles the display of enemy missile tracks. When active, incoming missiles are rendered as small, fast-moving symbols. For a multi-target volley, leaving this on grants a massive situational advantage. You can see exactly how many enemy Fox 3s are in the air, their range, and their closure rates. This enables you to time your defensive break with precision. For example, launching your fourth missile while an enemy missile track shows 15 kilometers and Mach 4 closure, knowing you have approximately 10 seconds before it goes pitbull. Some pilots prefer to disable missile tracks to reduce clutter, especially if the screen becomes saturated with dozens of incoming rounds. If you are new to top-tier BVR, experiment. Some players leave missile icons on for situational awareness, such as knowing how much time they have before they should notch. But other players prefer to keep the missile icons disabled so they can focus on launching all their missiles at enemy jets, making it easier to rapidly cycle through enemy jets and ensure your missiles are only fired at enemy jets rather than wasting shots on their ordnance. Friendly filter. This hides all friendly contacts from the radar. In TWS HDN mode, your radar already discriminates by closure direction, but friendly symbols can still appear if they cross your nose or your IFF momentarily lags. Removing them ensures that every displayed track is a valid hostile. This is usually off by default, but verify. If you fly a non-AESA jet, F-15E, older Eurofighter F-14, these filter options do not exist. Your radar will paint every return, missile, friendly, or enemy, as an undifferentiated green dot. Your only recourse is to tighten the radar scan, azimuth, and elevation to focus on the main threat axis. Use IFF to mentally filter friends, and rely on your RWR for missile warning. 2.3. The launch cadence, converting the rack into a salvo. You are at 10,000 meters, Mach 1.5 plus, with a full payload of active radar homing missiles. The nearest enemy track reads 30 kilometers, 18.6 statute miles. You are in TWS HDN, elevation set to cover the enemy altitude band. Your cycle key is under your finger. The following actions must occur as a single, uninterrupted motor program. Acquire the nearest high-priority target. Your TWS will already have multiple tracks. The default selection is usually the closest head-on contact. If not, tap the cycle key until the designator box sits on the closest low-altitude, high-closure target. Fire. Press and release the weapon release button. One Fox 3 will leave the rail. The missile immediately enters mid-course guidance via data link. The target's RWR receives no launch warning. Cycle. Immediately after the weapon release press, tap the cycle target key once. The designator advances to the next closest track. Do not pause to observe the missile. Trust the system. Fire again. Repeat step 2. Repeat the cycle and fire loop until the weapon counter reads 0. Every press of the cycle key selects a fresh, distinct track, preventing 2 missiles from being assigned to the same target unless you manually dwell or the formation is so sparse that only one track exists. In a dense formation of 6 to 7 enemies, you can expend 6 to 7 missiles in under 6 to 7 seconds. Cadence drills. With practice, the interval between missiles can be compressed to approximately 0.8 to 1.2 seconds. This rhythm, fire, cycle, becomes autonomic. In a Rafale with 8 Mica EMs, you can be clean of missiles in under 7 seconds. In an F-16 with 6 AMRAAMs, you can be clean of all 6 missiles in under 7 seconds. This speed is not vanity. It is a decisive factor in ensuring that the first missile to arrive is followed in quick succession by the second, third, and fourth, saturating the enemy's defensive capacity. A target that successfully notches the first missile may be in the middle of that maneuver and unable to notch the second, which arrives 2 seconds later from a slightly different angle due to differing launch times and target positions. Critical constraint. Do not hard lock. Your thumb must never touch the lock button. Stay in TWS. The green designator box is sufficient. The missile fire control system will compute the intercept, uplink the target's state vector, and launch. If a missile fails to fire, first check that you have a valid TWS designation. If the target is at the edge of the radar's gimbal limits, you may need to adjust your heading slightly. If the weapon still refuses to release and the clock is ticking, a brief hard lock may clear the software snag. Accept the loss of surprise on that single target and launch. Immediately break the lock by reducing back to TWS to reacquire the remaining tracks. 2.4 Launch Geometry and Range Gate Calculus. The opening match BVR Volley is not effective at arbitrary range. This doctrine defines an optimal launch window bounded by an approximate launch distance from the first hostile radar contact, 30 kilometers, 18.6 miles. This ideal distance is derived from the time of flight of your missile versus the time of an enemy missile to reach your aircraft, assuming both sides launch simultaneously. Outer limit, 30 kilometers. At Mach 1.6 closure, a typical Fox 3 will require roughly 25 to 35 seconds to intercept at 30 kilometers. The missile's no escape zone, NEZ, for a head-on, low-altitude target may be 20 to 25 kilometers, meaning if the target turns cold at any point during the missile's flight, the missile will still have energy to pursue. However, at 40 kilometers, 25 miles, the missile enters a marginal energy state where a simple beam turn with chaff can defeat it, particularly if the target is high and fast. Therefore, never launch beyond 40 kilometers, except with ultra-long-range weapons, Phoenix, Facor 90, and even then, expect lower PK. Inner limit, 19 kilometers. As you close inside 19 kilometers, the time of flight of enemy missiles already in the air at that point drops below 12 seconds, and the activation range of their seekers compresses your defensive timeline to under 5 seconds. If you are still firing missiles at 15 kilometers, you will be within the enemy's no escape zone and will almost certainly be struck before or during your turn. The BVR volley must be complete, and your defensive maneuver initiated no later than the moment the closest enemy track passes 19 kilometers on your TWS display. This demands that you begin your first launch at 30 kilometers and finish by 22 to 20 kilometers at the latest. Variable adjustment factors. If you are exceptionally fast, Mach 1.8 plus, you can stretch the outer limit slightly to 35 kilometers as your higher launch energy extends missile range. If the enemy formation is particularly dense and slow, lawn mowing fully loaded attackers, their closure rate may be lower. You can launch at 32 kilometers safely. If you detect an opposing space climber launching missiles at you from 35 kilometers, you must accelerate the volley and fire earlier, perhaps at 35 kilometers, accepting lower PK on some shots, then immediately crank and go cold. Survival overrides kill count. Altitude impact on missile drag. At 10,000 meters, air density is approximately 0.41 kilograms per cubic meter. The drag force is proportional to density, so a missile spends a far greater fraction of its motor impulse overcoming drag at sea level. At altitude, the missile's coast phase is extended by a factor of roughly 2 to 3 compared to a sea level launch, and its terminal velocity can exceed Mach 3. This is why your high perch is non-negotiable. Launching from 10 kilometers with Mach 1.6 plus is the sole reason you can achieve multikills at 25 to 30 kilometers with ordinary medium-range missiles. The Rafale, for example, can easily reach Mach 2 at 10 kilometers altitude before the launch window on any ARB map, which is why it can easily perform exceptionally at BVR enough, though the Mica EM is a shorter range Fox 3 missile. Speed makes all the difference. 2.5 Managing Incoming Missile Threat, the countdown to defensive break. The RWR will be vocal. By the time you initiate the volley, you must assume that at least part of the enemy team has acquired you on radar and launched their own Fox 3s. Your TWS screen, if missile tracks are visible, will show multiple inbound contacts closing at Mach 3 to 4. Your task is to finish the volley before the first of these missiles reaches its active state. Estimating time to active, TTA. A typical air-to-air missile launched from a similar range platform has a motor burn of 5 to 10 seconds, followed by a coast phase, and its seeker goes active at roughly 15 to 20 kilometers from you. If you see an enemy missile track at 30 kilometers, and your closure with it is Mach 3.5, approximately 1,200 meters per second, the range decreases by 1.2 kilometers per second. The missile will be at 20 kilometers in about 8 seconds and active a few seconds later. Your window is about 10 to 12 seconds from first detection. You must time your volley to finish within that interval. Do not abort the volley early. The worst error is to fire 3 missiles, see a missile warning, and break off. You will have sacrificed the kill potential of your remaining ordnance and will still need to defend. Instead, trust the timeline. Complete all launches, then immediately initiate Phase 3 defensive procedures: crank, notch, chaff, cold, turn. This requires discipline. The first few times you attempt it, you will misjudge and die. You will watch your missiles strike their targets while your own aircraft explodes. This is the tuition fee for mastery. Expect frequent death, but in time, you will overcome it and kill more than you die, using AESA missile tracks for precise timing. If you can see enemy missiles as distinct tracks, note the one with the highest closure rate and nearest range. When that track reaches 12 to 15 kilometers, you should be releasing your final missile and beginning the break. The neural link between visual track position and the fire last missile decision is what separates the average salvo from the flawless extraction. 2.6 Platform-specific radar nuances. AESA dominance and legacy workarounds. 2.6.1 AESA equipped aircraft. Rafale, Typhoon, AESA, F/A-18E, F-16 Pobit, F-15C Golden Eagle, Gripen E, J-10C, J-15T, Kfire C.10, Su-30SM-2. Your radar inherently tracks dozens of objects simultaneously with minimal degradation. You can leave missile tracks on the display without overwhelming the processor. Use this to gauge the incoming threat density. Expect TWS tracks to persist through mild notching attempts. AESA beamforming adaptively nulls jamming and clutter. Cycle rapidly through 8+ targets without experiencing a track drop. The refresh rate is high enough that the designator shifts instantaneously. Use the radar filters for missiles and friendlies to customize the display for the situation. 2.6.2 Legacy Pulse Doppler radars. F-15EAN/APG-70, F-14AWG-9/APG-71, older Eurofighter Captor M, Su-27, MiG-29. Your radar cannot filter missile returns. Anything that reflects radar energy appears as a green dot. Missiles will appear as extremely fast-moving dots that rapidly outpace the target cluster. You can partially discern them by narrowing the azimuth scan to ±30 degrees and increasing the scan speed. Fast-moving contacts will be updated more frequently and can be mentally flagged. Watching your RWR for missile guidance signals and correlating them with the presence of fast-moving dots at the same bearing. Prioritizing the launch at the enemy formation source, not the missiles. Legacy radars are also more susceptible to notching and chaff, so launch ranges should be slightly conservative, 25 to 28 kilometers rather than 30 kilometers, to ensure the data link can be maintained until the missile is close enough to self-guide. 2.7 Targeting discipline. Aircraft only, full salvo commitment. While an AESA radar-equipped aircraft can easily lock on and intercept enemy missiles, this is a pure waste of ammunition at the opening BVR stage of the match. You can easily notch an entire enemy team's worth of missiles with a simple 100-degree notch plus chaff. Even if 50 missiles were fired at you, you are traveling at such high speeds that a little notching and chaffing can evade them all. Therefore, use your filters or your Mark I eyeball and do not fire a single missile at enemy missiles during this stage. Your goal is enemy kills. Missiles can be easily notched. You may only need to shoot down enemy missiles later in the match, when you return to base and fly back out for your second sortie during 1v1 encounters. Shoot down the enemy's missile, preventing yourself from being destroyed by it. Then shoot another missile at his jet. That's the only time you may need to shoot down enemy missiles. The infamous Iron Dome strategy, which you will see me use several times throughout this video. Full salvo doctrine. Fire every radar missile on your aircraft's pylons. Do not retain a single missile for later. The logic is threefold. First, the energy state you possess during the opening golden window is unrepeatable later in the match. Climbing back to 10 kilometers with high Mach after rearming will be contested by survivors, and your energy will not be as high. Simply put, this is the best time to launch all your missiles. Second, missile density increases probability of kill. If you launch 6 missiles at a formation of 8 aircraft, even with a PK of 0.5 per missile, the expected kills are 3. With 8 missiles, expected kills rise to 4, and the salvo simultaneously forces the entire formation to evade, disrupting their attack on your team. Third, after the volley, you will land and rearm. Those missiles are not lost. They are replaced in under 5 minutes. The opportunity cost of holding a missile that could have added a kill in the opening surge far outweighs any hypothetical later use. The lesson is simple. Fire everything during the opening volley. Target prioritization reminder. Phase 1 principle reiterated. During the rapid cycle and fire loop, your sequence will automatically target in order of closest to farthest. If you desire a specific order, low altitude first, then high altitude, you must briefly pause and manually intervene by hovering the designator or cycling past certain targets. With practice, you can incorporate a skip function. If the cycle selects a high-altitude target you wish to engage later, tap cycle twice to move past it, reserving it for the end of the volley. This demands situational awareness, but can optimize the salvo's lethality. Realistically, though, you may not have time to do this, since you'll only have seconds to get your missile off the rails before you must evade enemy missiles. So it's good enough to simply fire every missile you have, and at bare minimum, ensuring each missile is fired at a different target. Never fire 2 or more missiles at one target. That is a waste. 2.8. The psychology of the perfect volley. Training for the dopamine cascade. The volley, executed correctly, produces a surge of kills in the kill feed that is unmatched in War Thunder. The sequence, launch, cycle, becomes a ritual. At the end of the ritual, You will see multiple aircraft destroyed messages appear within seconds. This is not luck. It is the deterministic output of a carefully engineered system where energy, radar silence, and salvo density converge. To internalize this, training must replicate the stress of the combat timeline. Use test flights or custom battles to practice the button sequence against stationary bots, then against maneuvering targets. Though the best practice is doing the real thing, so get into real matches and practice firing against real human players. You will die a lot at first, but the experience of fighting human enemies is invaluable. Count your cycle fire cadence. Aim to reduce the total volley time for a full missile complement to under 8 seconds. The faster you get all your missiles off the rails, the greater your chance to survive return fire. In live matches, accept early deaths. Each failure calibrates your internal clock. The goal is for the fingers to move without conscious thought when the RWR screams. You need to develop muscle memory. The active part of your brain must be free to monitor range, enemy missile tracks, and the impending break. When the last missile leaves the rail, you are no longer a missile launch platform. You are now an evader. Phase 3, the crank, the notch, the cold egress, begins the instant the weapon counter hits 0. The volley is complete. You have launched the hammer. Now you must escape so you can survive. Get back to base, reload, and get even more kills when you fly back out. Phase 3, defensive egress and survival protocol. 3.1, transition from hunter to evader. The cognitive shift. The instant the weapon counter reaches 0 and the last missile has departed the rail, your tactical identity undergoes a complete inversion. You are no longer the offensive node in the kill chain. You are now the highest value target in the battle space. Enemies are seeking vengeance for the teammates you just killed. Every enemy radar that has not been neutralized is searching for your emissions, and every missile launched in your direction, whether aimed or speculative, is now converging on your predicted position. The mindset must switch from deliberate execution of the volley sequence to the reflexive execution of a pre-planned survival routine. Hesitation is the primary cause of death. The motor program for egress must begin before the conscious brain fully acknowledges the empty rack state. Do this long enough, and you'll develop the required muscle memory. You'll already be notching before you consciously realize it. The psychological payload of the successful volley, the anticipation of imminent kill notifications, must be compartmentalized. Do not stare at the radar screen waiting for aircraft destroyed. That confirmation will arrive after you have turned cold, not before. Your attention is now monopolized by 3 primary instruments. The Radar Warning Receiver, RWR, for missile threat bearing and launch indications. The radar display for tracking incoming missile tracks, if visible. And the Mach/IAS indicator for energy state management. Secondary attention goes to the fuel gauge and altitude. Everything else is noise. 3.2. The Chaff wall, periodic countermeasure configuration and employment. 3.2.1 Loadout. Philosophy, pure chaff, 0 flares. At the extreme engagement ranges and closure geometries characteristic of the opening BVR exchange, infrared missiles pose 0 threat. An IR seeker requires a thermal contrast significantly above background, and at slant ranges exceeding 20 kilometers. The target's skin friction heat signature is attenuated by atmospheric absorption to undetectable levels. Moreover, no IR missile in the game possesses the energy to chase a cold, supersonic target over such distances. Therefore, the entire countermeasure payload can be dedicated to radar-guided threats. Load 100% chaff, no flares. This maximizes your defensive saturation capacity against the Fox 3S that will be chasing you. 3.2.2 Periodic Release Settings. The algorithmic smokescreen. Manual chaff release is insufficient. Under stress, human reaction time and the impulse to hoard countermeasures lead to sparse, poorly timed deployments that fail to break modern missile trackers. The solution is the periodic countermeasure release function configured before the match. Parameter. Setting. Rationale. Release interval, 0.1 seconds. Creates a dense burst, giving the missile's Doppler filter multiple simultaneous false targets within a single processing frame. Count per release. 4. Releases 4 chaff bundles in a 0.4 second burst, sufficient to form a credible false radar cross-section, RCS bloom. Repeat interval, 1 second. Sustains a continuous chaff corridor with a 0.6 second gap between bursts, preventing the missile from reacquiring your aircraft's track between clouds. This sequence produces a rhythmic chaff wall behind your aircraft. 4 chaff packets in rapid succession, a brief pause, then 4 more. The effective RCS of a chaff bundle is frequency dependent, but chaff cut to half wavelength of common X-band fire control radars, 8 to 12 gigahertz, will resonate, presenting a return comparable to a fighter-sized target for several seconds before dispersion degrades its effectiveness. When deployed continuously at 1 second intervals, you are effectively dragging a synthetic cloud of decoys that force the missile's onboard logic to contend with persistent false targets. 3.2.3 Activation timing. Engage periodic release immediately after the final missile launch, not after observing incoming missiles or hearing RWR warnings. The activation keybind should be adjacent to the weapon release and cycle target keys, allowing a seamless transition from offensive to defensive finger position. The chaff corridor must already be blooming before the missile's seeker transitions to active mode. Early deployment ensures that any mid-course update guided missile that goes pitbull finds itself staring into a field of chaff rather than a clean target track. 3.3. The cold turn, geometry and energy management. 3.3.1. Why not split S? A split S, rolling inverted and pulling a descending half loop, is a common but fatal mistake in this scenario. The initial phase of a split S involves pitching down while inverted, which translates to a forward displacement toward the threat before achieving a heading reversal. During this forward movement, your range to the incoming missile decreases, and you may inadvertently dive into its terminal acquisition basket. Furthermore, a split S converts altitude into speed, but does so abruptly, often bleeding energy through high G loading, and leaves you at low altitude with reduced options. The cold turn described below minimizes forward translation while maximizing lateral separation. 3.3.2. The hard bank reversal. 180 degrees in the horizontal plane. Execute a maximum performance, level or slightly descending turn to reverse heading 180 degrees. This is not a gentle maneuver. It is a full stick, potential G-low C inducing bank to the left or right. The choice of direction should be made based on the location of friendly airfields, turn toward the nearest safe base. The bearing of the highest threat enemy radar, turn to place the threat at your 3 or 9 o'clock, facilitating a subsequent notch. Any terrain or weather that could mask your egress. Initiate the turn with a roll to approximately 90 degrees of bank. Then apply continuous back pressure to sustain maximum instantaneous turn rate. The pilot blackout effect in War Thunder is a visual filter, not a control lockout. You can and should continue pulling through it. The objective is to achieve a nose-on-tail reversal in the minimum time and radius possible without departing controlled flight. For a supersonic aircraft at 10 kilometers, a 180-degree turn at Mach 1.6 will have a radius on the order of several kilometers. But the important metric is the lateral displacement perpendicular to the threat axis. A pure horizontal turn generates maximum cross-range separation early in the maneuver, which is precisely what defeats a missile that is guiding on collision course intercept geometry. 3.3.3 Acceleration after reversal. Afterburners stay lit. Once the nose is pointed away from the enemy, that is, you are cold, immediately go to full afterburner, if not already engaged. The combination of thin air at altitude and full thrust will rapidly accelerate you back to or beyond your previous Mach number. This cold state speed is your primary defense. A missile chasing a supersonic retreating target must overcome its own drag, while the target continuously opens the range. The missile's time to intercept, TTI, becomes a function of its initial energy plus motor boost minus the ever-increasing separation rate. At ranges beyond 30 kilometers, a Fox 3 chasing a Mach 1.6 plus cold target may simply run out of kinetic energy before impact, especially if the target is descending into denser air where missile drag increases. 3.3.4 The descent. Converting altitude to speed while cold. As you accelerate cold, initiate a controlled descent at a 30 to 45 degree dive angle. This is not a vertical panic dive. It is a deliberate energy conversion. The potential energy, altitude, is cashed in for kinetic energy, speed, further widening the energy gap between you and the pursuing missile. However, the descent serves a second purpose. It brings you into denser air, where the missile's drag increases exponentially. At sea level, air density is approximately 1.225 kilograms per cubic meter. At 10 kilometers, approximately 0.41 kilograms per cubic meter. A missile designed for high-altitude loft will encounter dramatically higher drag as it follows you into the thicker atmosphere, rapidly bleeding speed. By the time you level off at medium altitude, the missile's remaining energy may be insufficient to maneuver with you, even if it still has track. Caution. Monitor your fuel state. Full afterburner in dense air consumes fuel at a prodigious rate. You must balance the need for speed against the requirement to reach base. In a minimum fuel refill, 30%, you may need to throttle back to military power once the immediate missile threat is defeated and you are established on a homeward heading. This calculus will be discussed further in section 3.7. 3.4. The angled notch, compromising between track brake and separation. 3.4.1 Doppler notch physics. A pulse Doppler radar discriminates targets from ground clutter by their relative velocity along the radar line of sight, LOS. If a target flies exactly perpendicular to the LOS, that is, at 90-degree aspect, its LOS velocity is zero or near zero, causing its return to fall into the clutter notch filter and be rejected. This is the classic beam aspect notch. However, a perfect 90-degree notch means you are flying tangent to the threat axis. You generate no additional lateral separation, and if the missile is close, it may still reacquire when you inevitably roll out. 3.4.2 The 100-degree angled notch. The Doctrine prescribes an angled notch of approximately 100 degrees aspect, rather than a pure 90 degrees. This means flying with your tail slightly toward the threat, so that your LOS velocity is low, but not zero. Just enough to blur the Doppler return while still moving away from the missile. The advantages are, you continue to open the range, albeit more slowly than a pure cold run. The missile's onboard logic sees a closing target, not a stationary one, which reduces its reliance on Doppler and may prevent it from switching to a pure pursuit mode that could kinematically cut you off. The chaff wall is more effective in this geometry because the missile must look through the chaff cloud while also dealing with a semi-cooperative target. Execute the angled notch as follows. After the initial cold reversal and while periodic chaff is running, roll to place the threat RWR symbol on your 9 or 3 o'clock line. Then ease the nose slightly further away. So the threat symbol is at approximately 100 to 110 degrees relative bearing. Fly this heading until the missile's active track is confirmed lost. RWR launch tone ceases, missile track on radar disappears or diverges, then smoothly roll out to a pure cold heading. 3.4.3 Chaff synchronization in the notch. During the notch, the periodic chaff release is especially potent. Each burst of 4 chaff packets creates a momentary large RCS bloom. If the missile's seeker gate is wide, it may drift onto the chaff and lose lock. Even if it does not, the chaff degrades the signal-to-noise ratio, forcing the missile to work harder to maintain track. The combination of low Doppler signature and dense chaff is statistically the most reliable method to break a Fox 3 lock in War Thunder. 3.5 Terminal defense, missile defeat timeline and indicators. As you execute the escape, you must monitor the missile threat timeline. The RWR provides a primary indication through launch warning tones, signal strength, and active seeker detection. If your radar displays enemy missile tracks, you can visually gauge their range and closure. Key markers. Pitbull activation, approximately 15 to 20 kilometers range for typical ARH missiles. The missile's own seeker goes active. The RWR will indicate a M missile symbol with a solid lock tone. This is the moment your chaff and notch become critical. Time to intercept, TTI estimation. For a missile at Mach 4, 1,372 meters per second, closing on you at Mach 1.6, 550 meters per second, from 20 kilometers. The combined closure is approximately 1,922 meters per second, giving about 10.4 seconds to impact. If you initiate a cold turn and accelerate away, the closure rate drops dramatically, extending TTI. The missile must then navigate a stern chase, bleeding energy. Missile energy depletion. A missile that has been forced to maneuver and fly through dense chaff and thick air will eventually go ballistic. You will observe the missile track slowing, diverging, and ultimately disappearing. The RWR tone will fade. This is the confirmation that the immediate threat is neutralized. Do not relax until all missile tones have ceased and you have visually cleared your 6 o'clock, or radar shows no fast-moving tracks within 10 kilometers. Complacency at this stage still results in a posthumous kill. 3.6 Rip speed and structural integrity management. 3.6.1 Mach and IAS limits. Every aircraft has 2 critical speed limits, a Mach number limit, aerodynamic compressibility, and an indicated airspeed, IAS limit, dynamic pressure. At high altitude, Mach limit is usually reached before IAS limit due to the low density. At low altitude, IAS limit becomes dominant. Exceeding either leads to catastrophic structural failure, wing rip, tail separation. The HUD airspeed and Mach indicators turn red as you approach these thresholds. 3.6.2 Preventing self-destruction during escape. During the cold descent, your aircraft will accelerate rapidly. The denser air increases drag, but also makes the engines produce more thrust, often leading to a net speed increase. Monitor both indicators religiously. If Mach limit approaches, reduce throttle, deploy air brakes briefly, or shallow the dive. In some aircraft, for example, Rafale, Typhoon, simply leveling off at high altitude will prevent overspeed because the engines cannot overcome the thin air drag. If IAS limit approaches, usually at lower altitudes, throttle back immediately. Air brakes are highly effective in dense air. Do not yank the stick abruptly at high IAS, as the resulting G-load combined with high dynamic pressure can snap the wings even within the IAS limit if you exceed the G limit for that speed. 3.6.3 Fuel state and structural margin. Heavier fuel loads slightly raise the wing loading and reduce the margin to structural failure. Since you are flying with minimum fuel, your aircraft is lighter, which reduces the stress on the airframe for a given G load, but also means you accelerate faster, making overspeed more likely. Compensate with proactive throttle management. Memorize your jet's exact redline numbers. For example, Rafale M2.0+, Eurofighter M1.85, F-15C M2.5, but limited by thrust. IAS, approximately 1,450 kilometers per hour at low altitude. Internalize them as instinctively as your own heartbeat. 3.7 Egress and return to base procedures. 3.7.1 Fuel management for the run home. After the immediate missile threat is defeated, assess fuel. The climb, sprint, volley, and initial escape likely consumed 40 to 70% of your fuel, depending on aircraft and loadout. You must now reach a friendly airfield. If fuel is critical, throttle back to military power or even idle and maintain a best range speed, typically around Mach 0.8 to 0.9 at medium altitude, to maximize endurance. Avoid unnecessary turns. Fly the most direct route to base. If the battle space is still contested, keep your radar on and RWR monitor, and be prepared to notch or evade any stragglers. 3.7.2 Descent profile for base approach. Descend early to arrive at the airfield at an appropriate pattern altitude, 500 to 1,000 meters AGL. A high-speed, high-angle approach is acceptable for combat recovery. Enter the base area from an offset direction to avoid overflying the runway at Mach speed, then bleed energy as described below. 3.7.3 Combat landing technique. A standard stable approach is too slow and exposes you to potential enemy fire. The Doctrine uses an aggressive energy bleed landing. Initial approach. Come in at high speed, 800 to 900 kilometers per hour IAS, and low altitude, under 100 meters, to minimize detection and exposure. Energy dumping, over the runway or just before, throttle to idle, deploy air brakes, and initiate aggressive S-turns, weaving left and right with 60 to 80 degrees bank. The induced drag from high bank turns rapidly decelerates the aircraft without requiring a long straight in. Gear and flaps. As speed drops below gear extension limit, usually approximately 450 to 500 kilometers per hour, lower landing gear and extend landing flaps. The gear doors and flap deflection create enormous drag, further decelerating you. Touchdown and intentional gear collapse, the snap technique. If you are still too fast and risk overrunning, apply lateral stick input just as the wheels touch, banking slightly to snap the landing gear. This is an exploit of War Thunder's damage model. Collapsed gear creates massive friction, stopping the aircraft in a fraction of the normal distance. The aircraft will slide to a halt on its belly, and the repair timer will begin counting as soon as it stops. Be warned, this may count as a crash in some edge cases, but generally, if the aircraft is on the runway surface, it will be rearmed and repaired. The technique is risque, but widely used by top-tier players for tempo. Rearm and repair. Once stationary, the repair/rearm timer starts, typically 30 to 45 seconds. You will be fully replenished with missiles, chaff, and fuel, based on your selected loadout percentage, not a full tank. You can adjust fuel before rearming via the spawn menu. Do not leave the aircraft. Wait for the timer to complete, then afterburner takeoff for Phase 4. 3.8. The Dopamine Convergence. Kill feed during Egress. As you execute these defensive maneuvers, the earlier volley's effects manifest. The timing is such that while you are notching and running, the kill feed begins to populate. This simultaneous experience, evading lethal threats while reaping rewards, creates a potent psychological feedback loop. The aircraft destroyed messages confirm that your volley struck while you were already gone, reinforcing the entire doctrine as low risk, high reward. This is the peak moment. The sound of chaff bursts, the RWR tones, the kill feed chime, and the sight of your airfield approaching. You are simultaneously the ghost and the reaper. The escape phase is now complete. You have launched, survived, and are about to reset. Phase 4, the cleanup, will detail the re-engagement strategy against a shattered enemy team. Phase 4, the cleanup, post-volley exploitation and map dominance. 4.1, the battlefield. After the culling, state of the opposing force. The opening BVR volley has fulfilled its purpose. Multiple enemy aircraft have been removed from the order of battle. The survivors, however, are not a coherent formation, but a dispersed collection of individual actors operating under degraded conditions. Their tactical cohesion is shattered. They have experienced the psychological shock of losing wingmen to invisible attackers, and their subsequent behavior is characterized by altitude dispersion. Some have dived to the deck in panic. Others are climbing desperately to regain situational awareness. A few may have attempted to replicate a high-altitude BVR posture and are now at co-altitude with your egress path. Missile depletion. Many survivors have expended their initial loadout defensively, launching at ghosts, at your missiles, or at your teammates. Their remaining Fox 3 count is often 1 or 0, and they may have switched to IR missiles out of necessity. Fuel deficits. Extended afterburner use during the merge or defensive maneuvering has drained their tanks. Some are already turning cold for their airfield, while others are nursing a low fuel state with reduced combat power. Mental fatigue and target fixation. They are primed for close-range dogfighting, their attention locked onto the nearest friendly dot, or RWR spike. The broader battle space awareness they possessed during the pre-merge phase is gone. The cleanup phase exploits this collective state of disarray. You, having successfully egressed, landed, and rearmed, re-enter the battle not as a participant in a symmetric contest, but as an apex predator hunting a wounded herd. The tactical objective shifts from annihilate the formation to systematically dismantle individual survivors while preventing any from regrouping or mounting a coordinated defense. 4.2. The turnaround, minimizing ground time via rapid reloading. The interval between your wheels touching the runway and your afterburners igniting for the second sortie is the single greatest determinant of your impact during the cleanup. Every second spent stationary allows the enemy to climb, rearm, reposition, or consolidate. The Doctrine employs two mechanized methods to compress this turnaround to an absolute minimum. 4.2.1 Instant J out on undamaged aircraft. If your aircraft has suffered 0 damage during the escape, the damage indicator on the HUD infographic shows no yellow, orange, or red components. You can bypass the repair timer entirely. The procedure: bring the aircraft to a complete stop on the airfield surface. This can be the main runway, a taxiway, or even the grass adjacent to the runway, as long as the rearm/repair prompt appears. Immediately after the rearm and repair timer starts counting down, press the Leave Aircraft key, default J. The game will register that you have landed and exited a serviceable aircraft. You will be returned to the spawn screen, with your aircraft now fully repaired and available for a new loadout selection. The repair countdown is skipped. Warning: this technique works only on undamaged aircraft. If any component has sustained damage, exiting will count as a bailout and the aircraft will be lost, forcing you accept a death and not be allowed to respawn again. You only get 1 life in an Tier ARB match. In such cases, tolerate the repair timer. The safety margin is worth the delay. 4.2.2 Loadout Reconfiguration at the spawn screen. Once back at the spawn screen, you have the opportunity to change your payload. The opening volley demanded a pure BVR loadout. Maximum Fox 3S, Chaff only, minimum fuel. The cleanup phase is a different threat environment, and your loadout must be reconfigured accordingly. 4.3 Loadout Selection for the cleanup phase. The cleanup is a heterogeneous combat environment. You will face engagements at varying ranges against targets with different energy states and defensive postures. The loadout must provide a balance of BVR lethality, mid-range sustainment, and a credible close-range threat for opportunistic kills. 4.3.1 Primary Armament. Radar-guided missiles remain the core. The majority of your pylon capacity should remain dedicated to active radar homing missiles. The reasons are unchanged. BVR engagement denies the enemy the ability to retaliate with guns or short-range IR missiles, and it allows you to secure kills without entering a turning fight. However, the engagement ranges will be shorter than the opening volley, typically between 10 and 25 kilometers. Therefore, you are not loading for a mass 30-kilometer volley, but for a series of deliberate medium-range Fox 3 shots. A typical loadout might be 4 to 6 Fox 3s, depending on the aircraft's total pylon count. 4.3.2 Secondary Armament. IRCCM Heat Seekers for the notching enemy. The Doctrine strongly recommends carrying 2 infrared missiles equipped with infrared countermeasures, IRCCM capabilities. Examples include the AIM-9M, the ASR-AAM, the MICAIR, the R-73E with modern seekers, or the PL-8B/PL-10. These missiles incorporate processing logic, such as track rate discrimination, spectral analysis, or 2-color seekers, that makes them resistant to conventional flare rejection. The tactical niche for IRCCM weapons during cleanup is the enemy who has been forced into a radar defensive notch. When you launch a Fox 3 at a medium-range target, the target's optimal defense is to turn perpendicular to your radar, deploy Chaff, and reduce their Doppler return to 0. This beam aspect notch breaks your radar's ability to maintain a mid-course update, but it also presents the target in a perfect side aspect to an IR seeker. The target's engine exhaust is fully exposed to the flank, and the airframe's skin friction from high-speed flight adds a strong thermal contrast. In this geometry, a well-timed IRCCM missile launched from 3 to 5 miles, 5 to 8 kilometers, will track the target with high probability, even through chaff, because chaff is radar reflective, not IR opaque. The enemy, having just successfully notched your radar missile, will often be lulled into complacency, only to be destroyed by a heat seeker they never expected. Aircraft with dedicated wingtip IR pylons, for example F-16, F/A-18, Eurofighter, Rafale with the Magic II, and eventually the Mica IR, can carry these missiles with no sacrifice of Fox 3 capacity. Take them. They are a zero-cost addition that expands your engagement envelope into the IR domain. 4.3.3 Countermeasures. Chaff primary with optional flares. In the opening volley, flares were unnecessary because IR threats were non-existent at range. During cleanup, you may face IR missiles launched by enemies who have closed to within visual range, or who are loitering near your airfield with IR loadouts. Therefore, a mixed countermeasure loadout is advisable. 70% chaff, 30% flares. The chaff supply must remain dominant because radar-guided threats will still constitute the majority of the danger, but the flare allocation provides insurance against opportunistic IR launches during low-altitude repositioning or airfield defense. The periodic release settings, 0.1 second interval, 4 bursts, 1 second repeat, should be adjusted for the mixed loadout, or you may disable periodic release and revert to manual chaff/flare management to preserve supplies for the correct threat type. A separate periodic setting for flares is not recommended. Instead, keep flares manual and use them only when an IR launch is confirmed via RWR or visual detection. 4.3.4 Fuel load. Full or 60% for prolonged operations. The minimum fuel strategy of the opening phase is inappropriate for cleanup. You will be engaging in multiple combat cycles. Climb, engage, potentially extend to re-engage, and cruise to find remaining targets. The fuel burn of full afterburner combat can exceed 150 kilograms per minute for twin-engine fighters. A fuel state of 30%, for example, approximately 1,700 kilograms in a Rafale, might provide only 10 to 12 minutes of full throttle operation, which is insufficient for a protracted mop-up. The recommended fuel loads are Rafale, 60%, approximately 3,450 kilograms, balancing acceleration and endurance. Eurofighter Typhoon, full fuel, 100% approximately 5,000 kilograms, as its EJ-200 engines are exceptionally thirsty. 60% may still be sufficient on small maps. F-15C/E, full fuel, 6,100 kilograms internal, to allow multiple afterburner cycles. F/A-18E, full fuel due to lower fuel fraction and higher consumption. Su-30SM-2, full fuel, as the AL-31F engines drink heavily. The weight penalty of full fuel is significant, potentially 2,000 kilograms of additional mass compared to 50%, which reduces climb rate by 10 to 15% and acceleration by a similar margin. This is an acceptable trade-off for not being forced out of the fight prematurely due to fuel exhaustion. Experience will dictate the precise percentage for each aircraft on each map. Monitor your fuel state during cleanup sorties and adjust incrementally. 4.4 Re-attaining the energy perch. Climb out after reload. Upon takeoff, Your immediate priority is to regain altitude and kinetic energy. The airfield's location provides a safe corridor to climb, typically behind friendly lines, but the situation may be more contested than the start of the match. Enemy aircraft may already be orbiting your base, especially if your team is losing. Therefore, the reclimb must be executed with greater tactical caution. 4.4.1 Safe Climb Geometry. Do not climb straight ahead from the runway on the default takeoff heading. Instead, after takeoff, turn to an offset heading of 20 to 30 degrees away from the expected threat axis. This lateral separation prevents a direct head-on intercept with any enemy who is approaching your airfield to strafe or camp. Continue climbing at the maximum energy-sustaining angle, as described in Phase 1, Section 1.3. Maintaining or increasing Mach. Monitor the RWR closely for any radar emissions. If a spike appears from a bearing that aligns with the expected enemy position, you may need to break off the climb and defend, or use terrain masking to regain the initiative. 4.4.2 Altitude Target for Cleanup. Flexible Perch. You will seldom achieve the pristine 10,000-meter perch of the opening volley. The enemy is distributed across the map, and the fight may have devolved into lower altitude scraps. A more realistic altitude target for cleanup is 5,000 to 8,000 meters, 16,000 to 26,000 feet. This provides a sufficient look-down angle to maintain radar coverage over terrain-masking enemies, adequate missile energy advantage over deck-hugging targets. The density difference between 6,000 meters and sea level is significant. Air density at 6 kilometers is approximately 0.66 kilograms per cubic meter, about half sea level, still affording reduced drag. Enough altitude buffer to perform a diving escape if outnumbered. If the battle space is completely devoid of high-altitude threats, you may level off at 5,000 meters and accelerate to a supersonic sprint. The key is to establish an energy state that is superior to the majority of the remaining enemies. If you are alone and outnumbered, a higher perch, 8,000 to 10,000 meters, is still preferable, as it maximizes your ability to engage and disengage at will. 4.5 Medium-Range BVR. The core of cleanup engagements. The cleanup phase is defined by engagements at 8 to 25 kilometers, the realm of medium-range BVR. The same principles of radar employment, TWS silence, and energy management apply, but the temporal and spatial margins are compressed. Mistakes that were recoverable at 30 kilometers are fatal at 15 kilometers. 4.5.1 Radar management in a cluttered environment. Set your TWS radar to a reduced range scale appropriate to the engagement, typically 40 kilometers or 80 kilometers, depending on the expected enemy density. Maintain TWS HDN to filter retreating targets, but be aware that some survivors may be cold, running away to their own airfields. If you intend to hunt them, switch to a wider TWS mode that includes all aspects, or use the radar elevation to scan behind you briefly, but do so sparingly to avoid being surprised by incoming threats. 4.5.2 Engagement Decision Logic. Prioritize targets based on threat and kill probability. Isolated high-closure contacts. An enemy flying directly towards you at medium altitude. They are likely unaware or confident. A Fox 3 launch at 20 to 25 kilometers, followed by an immediate crank, yields high PK, low energy, low altitude targets, enemies orbiting near the deck, slow. They are vulnerable to a diving Fox 3 shot that negates multipathing. Launch from above 5,000 meters at 15 to 20 kilometers range. The high-angle dive makes the ground reflection ineffective. Engaged or distracted enemies. targets that are dogfighting your teammates. They have low energy and may not be scanning the sky. A Fox 3 from an unexpected quarter is nearly impossible to defend against. High-altitude threats, surviving space climbers. Engage them only if you have an energy advantage or surprise. Otherwise, avoid and hunt the easier prey first, then gang up on the high-altitude enemy later with numbers. 4.5.3 Launch Geometry for medium-range kills. The launch window is narrower. Against a head-on target at 15 kilometers, with a combined closure rate of Mach 2.5, the missile's time of flight is roughly 12 to 15 seconds. The enemy's reaction time from pitbull activation is 3 to 5 seconds. You must launch, crank, and be prepared to defend almost simultaneously. The sequence: acquire target in TWS, launch at 15 to 20 kilometers, for high-energy targets 20 kilometers, for lower energy 15 kilometers. Immediately crank to place the threat at 60 to 70 degrees off the nose, maintaining data link updates while presenting a high LOS rate to any incoming missile. Monitor RWR and radar for enemy launches. If an incoming missile is detected, transition to the angled notch, Phase 3, Section 3.4, while sustaining your own missile's data link for as long as possible. 4.5.4 Chase shots. Kinematic constraints on fleeing targets. A common cleanup scenario is a target running cold toward its airfield, pursued by you. The missile launch range must account for the fact that the target is opening the range. A Fox 3 fired from 16 kilometers behind a Mach 1.0 target will spend its entire boost phase simply trying to catch up, and by the time it reaches the target will have traveled several kilometers farther, often placing it outside the missile's effective range. The rule of thumb is never launch at a fleeing target beyond 5 miles, 8 kilometers, unless you have a substantial altitude advantage and supersonic speed. Even at 8 kilometers, the missile's terminal energy may be marginal. The optimal tactic is to close the distance to 3 to 5 kilometers before launching, using your own superior speed and altitude to compress the range. This demands aggression and energy discipline. Afterburner toward the target, slight dive if needed to gain speed, then launch when within the lethal envelope. If the target is at low altitude, expect them to multipath. Thus, a steep dive angle is necessary to make the missile's impact angle sufficient to break the multipath geometry. Phase 1, Section 1.2. 4.6. The Iron Dome Method. Active Missile Interception. AESA radars open a unique capability during cleanup: the active shooting down of incoming enemy missiles. This technique, colloquially termed Iron Dome, leverages the radar's ability to track and designate high-speed small RCS targets, missiles, and the missile's ability to guide onto them. 4.6.1 Enabling Conditions. AESA-equipped aircraft. See Phase 1, Section 0.4. Radar filters set to display enemy missiles. Sufficient Fox 3 payload to expend on defensive interception. At least 2 missiles for self-defense. A radar scan cone narrowed to a focused azimuth, plus or minus 30 degrees, and a high bar count to maximize update rate. This ensures that fast-moving missile tracks are refreshed frequently, providing a stable fire control solution. 4.6.2 Interception Technique. When an enemy missile is detected as a distinct track on the radar, represented by a missile symbol, cycle to it using the TWS cycle target key. Once designated, launch a single Fox 3 at the incoming missile. At ranges below 10 kilometers, the probability of kill against a non-maneuvering, ballistic or semi-ballistic missile target is near 100%. The missile is a cooperative target with a predictable trajectory, and the Fox 3's own seeker can acquire its radar return, or, if the enemy missile is ARH, the seeker may even lock on to the enemy missile's own seeker emissions, home-on-jam effect. Though not explicitly modeled in all cases, the radar cross-section is sufficient. The interception typically occurs within 3 to 5 seconds, neutralizing the threat. 4.6.3 Combined Offensive-Defensive Sequencing. The true power of Iron Dome is its integration into an offensive sequence. Consider a head-on joust at 15 kilometers against a single enemy with an AESA radar. The sequence: both you and the enemy launch Fox 3s at each other. You immediately cycle to the incoming enemy missile track and launch a second Fox 3 at it, defensive shot. You then cycle back to the enemy aircraft and launch a third Fox 3, offensive shot. Or, if you have only 2 missiles, you must decide whether to use the second missile for defense or offense. Ideally, with high missile count platforms, F-15C Golden Eagle with 12 AMRAAMs, F/A-18E with 12, Su-30SM-2 with 12. You can afford both. Your defensive missile destroys the incoming threat. You are now safe and can press the crank to support your offensive missile. The enemy, if they do not employ the same counter, will be forced to defend against your missile while their missile has been destroyed, giving you a massive asymmetry. This tactic is so effective that it is often considered unsportsmanlike by opponents. It nullifies the enemy's attack while preserving your own, turning a mutual joust scenario into a one-sided execution. It is, however, highly demanding in terms of radar management and rapid target cycling, and must be practiced extensively to perform under stress. 4.6.4 Limitations. Iron Dome should not be attempted against salvos of more than 2 simultaneous enemy aircraft, as the cycle and fire cadence cannot keep pace, and you will run out of missiles before they do. It is best employed in 1v1 or 1v2 scenarios during cleanup. Against multiple incoming missiles from 88 different enemy aircraft, revert to conventional evasion, notch, chaff, cold egress. 4.7 Asymmetric Warfare. The Outnumbered BVR Pilot. If your team has collapsed and you find yourself alone against multiple survivors, the cleanup phase becomes an exercise in asymmetric warfare. The principles remain consistent. Control the engagement geometry, isolate enemies, and exploit their impatience. 4.7.1 Preservation of the Energy Perch. Do not descend to engage unless forced. Holding altitude above 5,000 meters allows you to dictate the terms of the fight. Low-flying enemies must climb to reach you, bleeding energy and exposing themselves to diving Fox 3 shots. If multiple enemies attempt to climb simultaneously, you can pick off the lead climber before he reaches co-altitude, then extend cold to reset. 4.7.2 Separation and Baiting. Fly orbits at the edge of the enemy's effective radar detection range, typically 40 to 50 kilometers for most radars against a high-altitude target. Present yourself as a lone, perhaps wounded, straggler. Inevitably, one enemy will detach from the group to pursue. Engage that isolated enemy rapidly with a medium-range Fox 3, then egress before his wingmen can close. Repeat this process, whittling down their numbers one by one. 4.7.3 Terrain, Masking, and Stealth Approaches. On maps with significant elevation changes, Rocky Mountains, Afghanistan, Golan Heights, you can employ terrain masking to close the distance undetected. Fly low, under 100 meters AGL. with your radar in standby or off to suppress emissions. Use the head-mounted display, HMD, to visually scan for targets, or rely on RWR bearings to estimate enemy positions. When you pop up from behind a ridge, you may be within 5 kilometers of an unsuspecting target, enabling a near-guaranteed Fox 3 kill with no time for the enemy to react. This is the closest approximation to stealth in War Thunder, and it is devastating during cleanup against survivors who believe they are safe. 4.7.4 Airfield Denial. Strafe and ambush on forward bases. Many players, especially those who have depleted their missiles, will land at forward, unprotected airfields to rearm, often lazily ignoring the threat of attack. If you observe an enemy landing at such a field, you can exploit it ruthlessly. Approach low and fast, radar off, and strafe the runway or launch a Fox 3 as they touch down or take off. This is a dirty tactic, but is an extension of the predatory philosophy. You are exploiting every vulnerability created by the enemy's own complacency. Forward airfields have no anti-aircraft systems, making them easy targets. 4.8 Psychological Dominance and Endgame Momentum. The cleanup phase is as much a psychological operation as a kinetic one. The survivors have already been shattered once. They are now facing a rearmed, high-energy opponent who is picking them off methodically. Their stress levels are elevated, their decision-making is impaired. You can accelerate their collapse by using shock and speed, execute kills quickly and without hesitation. A sudden death in the kill feed while they are evading your teammates creates a sense of hopelessness, forcing repeated defensive cycles. If an enemy notches your Fox 3, immediately follow up with another from a different angle or an IRCCM shot. Do not allow them to recover energy or orientation. The relentless pressure will cause them to make a mistake, bleed too much energy, fly into the ground, or lose situational awareness and fly into a teammate's missile. Conserving your own presence. Do not linger in a single area after a kill. Relocate, climb, or go cold to reset. Your unpredictability prevents the survivors from coordinating a counter-ambush. When executed to perfection, the cleanup phase can elevate a 3-kill opening volley into a 6 or 7-kill game, earning you the Hero of the Sky and Survivor medals, and completely demoralizing the opposing team. It is the final stroke that seals the match and solidifies your position as the dominant force in the battle space. 4.9 Procedural Checklist for Phase 4. Upon landing after Phase 3, if undamaged and fully stopped with repair timer visible, press J to return to spawn screen instantly. If damaged, wait for repair timer to complete. Loadout selection. Primary 4 to 6 Fox 3S or full capacity. Secondary 2 IRCCM missiles on wingtip or dedicated pylons if available. Countermeasures 70% chaff, 30% flares, periodic release off or reconfigured for chaff only, manual flares. Fuel 60%, Rafale or full, others. Adjusted for map size. Takeoff and climb. Offset heading after takeoff. Climb at energy-sustaining angle to 5,000 to 8,000 meters, depending on threat. Monitor RWR. If safe, sprint to desired perch. Situational assessment. Set TWS range to 40 to 80 kilometers. Elevation to cover expected altitude band. Identify closest, highest priority targets. Isolated, low energy, distracted. Engagement sequence, medium range. Acquire target in TWS, launch at 15 to 20 kilometers, head-on, or closer if chasing. Crank immediately. If enemy missile launched, decide Iron Dome intercept if AESA and missile stock allows, else angled notch with chaff. After kill or if shot misses, disengage cold briefly to reset, then re-engage next target. Outnumbered protocol. Maintain altitude, isolate one enemy at a time. Use terrain masking if necessary. Avoid engaging more than two simultaneously. Use speed to retreat and re-engage. Endgame. Hunt stragglers, airfield campers, and rearming enemies at forward bases. Conserve fuel and missiles for final kills. Land only when all threats eliminated or fuel critical. The cleanup phase is where the strategic framework of the opening volley bears its final fruit. It transforms a statistical multikill into a decisive, match-defining victory. When performed with discipline and aggression, you will find that the second half of the match is not a chaotic scramble, but a controlled harvest. Section 5. Contingency operations, systemic instabilities, and failure mode mitigation. 5.1. The operational environment, a legacy engine under extreme load. The BVR Volley Doctrine imposes demands on the War Thunder client that exceed its design paradigm. The game engine, originally architected for subsonic visual range propeller combat, has been incrementally retrofitted with supersonic flight models, pulse Doppler radar simulation, beyond visual range missile guidance, electronic warfare abstraction, and multi-sensor fusion. The result is a software system operating at the edge of its architectural tolerance. When you execute a rapid sequence multi-launch while simultaneously managing TWS track files, data link updates, countermeasure sequencing, and high Mach flight dynamics, you are stress testing subsystems that were never intended to function with such concurrency. Systemic failures, colloquially bugs, are not anomalies. They are inherent characteristics of the simulation layer. A complete BVR practitioner must therefore be not merely a tactician, but a contingency operator, capable of diagnosing, compensating for, and exploiting the engine's non-deterministic behavior. This section catalogs the primary failure modes encountered during the opening volley phase, analyses their likely software-level causes, and prescribes doctrinal countermeasures. The objective is to harden your execution loop against game engine entropy, ensuring that mission completion is achieved even when the interface betrays you. 5.2 Failure Mode. Alpha TWS track refusal to launch. The stuck weapon phenomenon. 5.2.1 Symptom Profile. You are in the launch basket. Altitude 10,000 meters, Mach 1.6 plus, TWS HDN active. A target designated with a stable soft lock, green square in third-person view, track file indicated on radar. All firing parameters are satisfied. You depress the weapon release button. The missile remains on the rail. No launch transient, no error message, no HUD symbology change. Repeated actuation yields no result. The launch window compresses while the enemy formation closes and their missiles transit toward you. 5.2.2 Probable Causes. This failure mode appears to stem from a race condition in the radar fire control logic. Under high track file density and rapid cycling, the fire control system, FCS, may fail to validate the selected track as a launch-eligible target despite the visual indication. Contributing factors include track file staleness, The TWS revisit interval for a given track may have elapsed, and the FCS considers the solution degraded, even though the display continues to show the last known position. The launch authorization algorithm requires a fresh update. If the track was not recently illuminated, launch is inhibited. Data link channel contention. The aircraft's weapon data link may already be servicing multiple in-flight missiles. If the maximum number of simultaneous mid-course guidance channels is saturated, a new launch may be queued rather than executed, with the queue failing to process due to a software timing error. Elevation gimbal limit threshold. The target may be at the edge of the radar's elevation scan volume. The TWS designation is maintained, but the fire control computer cannot generate a valid mid-course steering command within the gimbal constraints, silently rejecting the launch. User input polling desynchronization. Rapid sequential button presses for weapon release and target cycle can produce an input buffer overflow, where the fire command is registered before the target designator update has propagated through the netcode, resulting in an empty track reference. 5.2.3 Immediate action drills. When the weapon fails to release, execute the following escalation sequence without cognitive hesitation. Sustain press, 1 to 2 seconds. Continue depressing the fire button. The input polling loop may require multiple frames to process the launch command. A deliberate, prolonged press sometimes overcomes a transient FCS validation delay. Micro-maneuver to refresh track. Apply a gentle sub-degree heading change, yaw, or bank to alter the radar's line of sight to the target. This forces an immediate track file update and may provide the fresh data required to satisfy launch criteria. Then re-attempt fire. Abandon the track. Cycle to next target. If the weapon still does not release, immediately press the cycle target key. The stalled track is compromising the entire volley timeline. A 1.5-second delay for one target translates to a 4 to 6 kilometer closer enemy missile. Sacrifice the single engagement to preserve salvo momentum. Emergency STT override, last resort. If the target is of exceptional tactical value, clueless, high closure, high altitude, and the missile must be delivered, execute a rapid transition to single target track, STT, by pressing the lock key. STT provides a continuous illumination that almost universally triggers launch authorization. Fire immediately upon lock confirmation, then break the lock and revert to TWS to recover the remaining track files. This action broadcasts a hard lock warning to the target and forfeits surprise on that specific engagement, but it converts a failed launch into a kill. 5.2.4 Preventive measures. Pacing the cycle fire cadence. While the ideal cadence is sub 1 second per missile, deliberately inserting a 0.2 to 0.3 second pause between cycle and fire commands can reduce input buffer contention. Radar mode preconditioning. Before entering the 30-kilometer launch window, briefly toggle TWS off and on again, or cycle the radar range scale. This resets internal track file processing states and reduces the probability of stale data. AESA platform advantage. AESA radars exhibit lower incidence of this bug, likely due to higher track refresh rates and improved data link management. If available, prioritize AESA-equipped aircraft. 5.3 Failure mode. Beta, track file contamination, and cycle corruption, the missile clutter bug. 5.3.1 Symptom profile. With radar filters engaged to hide enemy missiles and ordnance, the TWS cycle target function nevertheless advances through invisible tracks, missiles, glide bombs, perhaps even ejected countermeasure clouds. before eventually landing on a genuine aircraft. The time required to cycle from one valid target to the next increases by a factor of 3 to 5, breaking the launch rhythm and causing critical delays. This behavior persists despite the filter UI appearing to function correctly. 5.3.2 Probable causes. This is a confirmed interface defect acknowledged by the developers as of mid-2026. The radar filter system operates on the display rendering layer, not the target designation logic. When you press the cycle target key, the game iterates through the internal track file list, which includes all objects detectable by the radar, regardless of their visual filter state. The filter only suppresses the icon. It does not exclude the track from the cycling sequence. Thus, the user cycles blind through dozens of non-aircraft contacts, unable to distinguish them until the designator lands on a visible aircraft symbol. The density of non-aircraft radar returns increases non-linearly after the first wave of missile launches, creating a positive feedback loop. The more missiles in the air, the worse the cycle contamination. The longer it takes to distribute your own missiles, the more enemy missiles are launched in the interim, further saturating the track list. 5.3.3 Countermeasure strategies. Option 1. Pre-saturation launch, the clean sky method. Initiate your volley earlier than the optimal 30-kilometer range gate, perhaps at 35 to 40 kilometers, when the total number of airborne missiles is 0 or minimal. The track list is populated almost exclusively by aircraft, and cycling is fast and deterministic. The trade-off is reduced PK due to longer missile flight times. However, a clean, complete volley with slightly lower per-missile lethality can out-yield a delayed, corrupted volley that only manages to launch 3 missiles before the window collapses. Against unsuspecting, non-maneuvering targets, the marginal range penalty is often acceptable. Option 2. High-speed cognitive filtering. Develop the ability to mentally discriminate track types based on radar symbology, closure rate, and altitude, even when the filter is bypassed. On AESA sets with missile icons, you can still see whether the designator has selected a jet icon or a missile icon. In the split second after cycling, your brain must register the icon shape and decide to fire or cycle again. Drill this until it becomes a pre-attentive visual reflex. For legacy radars without icons, rely on closure rate. A missile will show a closure of Mach 3 to 5, far exceeding any aircraft. If the closure rate is absurdly high, cycle immediately. Option 3. Manual target selection override. As a fallback, use the mouse to click directly on a visible aircraft return on the radar display. This bypasses the cycling list entirely and designates the track deterministically. The speed penalty is significant, approximately 1 to 2 seconds per selection versus 0.5 seconds for a clean cycle. But it is immune to clutter contamination. In situations where the cycle is completely jammed, transition to manual designation for the remaining missiles. Accept that fewer missiles will be launched. Survival is the priority. Option 4. Statistical saturation fire, the slot machine protocol. If the contamination is so severe that neither cognitive filtering nor manual selection can sustain the volley, engage the terminal contingency. Fire a missile at each cycled track without discrimination. Do not attempt to identify the target. Cycle, fire, at maximum rate. The underlying mathematics of a dense formation ensures that a significant fraction of tracks are enemy aircraft. In a 12-player enemy team with, say, 30 missiles in the air and 5 bombs, the probability of randomly selecting an aircraft on any given cycle is approximately 12 over open parenthesis, 12 plus 30 plus 5 close parenthesis, approximately equals 25%. With 8 missiles fired, the expected number of aircraft engaged is 2, and with PK of 0.6 per engagement, a multi-kill is still statistically likely. This method abandons precision for volume, and it is surprisingly effective in the opening seconds of a large-scale missile exchange. It is the ultimate expression of trust the law of large numbers. 5.4 Additional Systemic Failure Modes. 5.4.1 Look-down clutter loss. Missed low-altitude contacts. At 10,000 meters, the radar must look down into the ground clutter spectrum. Even with pulse Doppler processing, low-flying targets with low relative velocity, for example notching, slow, or flying parallel to terrain, can be filtered out as ground returns. This results in a clean TWS display that is missing 2 to 4 enemy aircraft hugging the deck. These unseen targets will later appear as surprise threats or missile sources. Mitigation. Periodically adjust radar elevation to sweep the 0 to 2 kilometers altitude band, even if it temporarily reduces track count on the main formation. Cross-reference RWR bearings with radar tracks. A radar spike from a bearing with no corresponding track indicates an undetected low flyer. Prioritize such targets if they appear to be launching. 5.4.2 Data link dropout during crank. As you crank to place the threat at your beam, the radar's antenna gimbal limits may be exceeded for some tracked targets, particularly those far to the side. Mid-course updates cease, and the missile goes pure inertial or autonomous earlier than desired, reducing accuracy. Mitigation. Monitor the TWS track status. A track that begins flashing or changes symbology indicates data link degradation. Crank angle should be limited to 60 to 70 degrees, unless you have a radar with extremely wide field of regard, for example AESA with plus or minus 70-degree gimbal. Plan the volley so that the highest priority targets are engaged before the crank angle grows too large. 5.4.3 Premature missile activation due to misjudged closure. If the enemy formation contains unusually fast aircraft, space climbers at Mach 1.8+, the combined closure may cause your missile to go pitbull much earlier than anticipated, alerting the target while the missile is still outside the no-escape zone. Mitigation. Identify and tag high-speed contacts during the sprint phase. Adjust launch timing. Fire at these targets later in the volley and from slightly shorter range to compress their reaction window. Use high-energy missiles, for example Mica EM AIM-12OD, against these targets. 5.4.4 Chaff exhaustion during egress. The periodic release settings, 4 chaff per second, consume countermeasures rapidly. A full chaff load of 120 bundles will be exhausted in 30 seconds. If the egress is prolonged due to multiple missile threats or a long run home, you may run silent. Mitigation. Once the initial wave of incoming missiles is defeated, RWR silent, no tracks within 15 kilometers. Toggle periodic release off. Rely on manual chaff for any pop-up threats. During cleanup, a mixed loadout with flares reduces total chaff capacity. Avoid continuous periodic release and instead use short bursts during active missile warnings. 5.4.5 Fuel miscalculation on the return leg. After a prolonged egress with afterburner, fuel may be critically low. An unexpected headwind, an extra defensive turn, or a map with a distant airfield can cause flameout before landing. Mitigation. Monitor fuel quantity continuously during egress. If fuel drops below 500 kilograms, or equivalent minutes of flight at military power, and the airfield is not yet within 20 kilometers, throttle back to idle and glide at best LD speed. Accept that you will not re-engage. Survival is the priority. Over time, internalize fuel consumption rates for each aircraft and loadout. 5.5. Conclusion: the BVR Doctrine as a living system. The BVR Volley Doctrine is not a static set of instructions, but an adaptive framework for imposing order on the chaotic, sensor-saturated, engine-stressed environment of top-tier ARB. It treats the match not as a sequence of dogfights, but as a single integrated fire control problem, where altitude, speed, radar silence, and salvo density combine to produce deterministic, repeatable multi-kills before the enemy's tactical geometry can form. Mastery of this doctrine yields a transformation in both performance and perception. The opening minutes of a match cease to be a period of anxiety and become a clockwork execution. You spawn, convert the air spawn energy into a high Mach perch, build a radar picture, and release a synchronized wave of active missiles. The defensive egress is not a retreat, but a planned phase change, where the kill feed validates the earlier calculations while you are already cold and safe. The cleanup phase extends that dominance, converting a statistical salvo into a match-breaking victory. The emotional reward, the dopamine cascade of simultaneous kill notifications against a backdrop of missile evasion, is intense and habit-forming. But beneath the neurological high lies a deeper satisfaction, the understanding that you have exploited the game's physics, its sensor models, and its interface mechanics more completely than the opposition. You have outthought the merge. You have bypassed the furball. You have, in a very real sense, played a different game from everyone else on the server. This guide has equipped you with the operational level doctrine, the phase-by-phase procedures, the sensor configuration protocols, the launch cadence drills, the defensive geometry, the reload tempo, and the contingency responses now form a complete toolkit. The remaining work is individual. Hours of deliberate practice, refinement of muscle memory, calibration of fuel loads, and the development of that indescribable instinct for when a launch window is ripe and when it is closing. The merge will always be there, waiting for those who prefer the lottery of close-range combat. But you, having absorbed this doctrine, will inhabit the space above and before the merge. You will be the unseen hand that deletes aircraft from the kill feed before the furball ignites. You will be the ghost in the thin air at 10,000 meters, silent in TWS, and the first warning your targets receive will be the pitbull growl of a missile that has already won. Climb high, cycle fast, fire everything, turn cold. Let the kill feed come to you. A star screams, and the sky answers with fire. Like and subscribe. There will be many more of these detailed tactical war thunder guides in the future.